Hello, thank you for joining me. My name is Carrie Mallon and I am super excited for this video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you guys 8 principles of evolutionary tarot. In a moment, I'm going to go more in depth on what evolutionary tarot is and where this concept came from, but I want to start by sharing a series of synchronicities that brought me here to make this video. So the first thing is I am redoing The Artist's Way. If you are not familiar with The Artist's Way, I talk about it all the time. It changed my life the first time I went through this. It's a book which is formatted as a course. It's written by Julia Cameron, and the idea of The Artist's Way is it's a series of exercises to help you unblock your creativity. At the beginning of The Artist's Way, Julia Cameron lists some basic principles, and she recommends that you reference back to those basic principles again and again as you're going throughout the course. And for many years, I've had this idea floating around in the back of my head, because The Artist's Way is so dear to my heart, that it would be fun to create my own basic principles for the way that I read tarot, but I'd never gotten around to actually doing it, but I've had that idea kind of floating around in my head for a while. And now that I'm revisiting The Artist's Way, I was thinking about it even more. The second synchronicity is that I'm also reading this book, The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. This is an astrology book. And Stephen Forrest practices astrology through a modality that he refers to as evolutionary astrology. As I am often saying, I'm an astrology newbie. Maybe I can upgrade myself now to astrology beginner now that I'm actually really studying and reading a book and getting a little more serious about astrology, but I don't want to go too far into trying to define what evolutionary astrology is, because just from my understanding it has, it comes from a lot of different places and there's not one really concise way to define what it is, but I will share with you the basic definition that Stephen Forrest gives of evolutionary astrology, which is essentially that it is a way of practicing astrology that fuses metaphysical wisdom and more kind of modern humanistic psychology. And of course, when I read about that, I thought, oh, that's really cool. That's kind of how I read tarot. And that led me to wonder, has anyone ever used this specific terminology with tarot? Is there sort of a tarot philosophy that we could call evolutionary tarot? So to answer that question, I did a search online for evolutionary tarot, and there's a few things that come up. The main thing that comes up if you Google that phrase, evolutionary tarot, is actually a deck with the same title. Now, I will say I didn't look at the deck, so I'm not sure if the deck itself with that title fits into what I'm going to talk about today, but I did want to mention there is a deck that exists with this title. I don't know a lot about it. The most notable thing that I discovered is a blog that belongs to James Wells. Now, I kind of vaguely recognized his name. I think because I've heard my friend Shona talk about him. Shona, if you happen to watch this, you'll have to let me know if I'm remembering correctly. But he was someone I wasn't really super familiar with. The name just kind of rung a vague bell in the back of my head. But anyways, so he is a tarot practitioner. Sadly, his blog has not been updated for a few years, so I hope he's still around and doing tarot things, because like I said, I just discovered his blog, and with the teeny tiny dip that I've done into his teachings, I loved it so much. I really resonate with his style. And James does use that phrase, evolutionary tarot, to describe the way that he works with the cards, which is why I discovered his blog when I was searching for that particular phrase. Another super cool synchronicity is James actually used the specific title on the blog is The Basic Principles of Evolutionary Tarot. Of course, I'll link to his blog post in the comment bar thing, description thing on this video. Actually, I just paused for a second and looked at it more closely, and the phrasing that James used is the basic tenets, but I still thought it was really cool because I was going and thinking, I want to come up with this list and call it the basic principles, which is how it's phrased in The Artist's Way, and even the way James phrased it is very similar, so it was just a lot of cool synchronicities lining up. In this post, James shares 8 basic tenets of evolutionary tarot, and what I'm going to do is share his reflections with you, and I'm going to add some of my thoughts on them because I love them so much and I just really want to talk about them. Before I dive in to the 8 principles, I want to mention James describes this at the beginning of the blog post, that these are essentially a set of living principles. So I would think of these as touchstones, as foundations if you resonate with this style of tarot. They're not meant to box you in. They're not meant to be like formal rules. They're just meant to be things that help you think about the core sort of vision, the core philosophy that you have about tarot if you resonate with this style, this evolutionary style of tarot, which I very much do. So without further ado, let's dive in and talk about them. First up, James says, the tarot is not a belief system, it is simply a tool. This is another amazing synchronicity because if you've been following me on Instagram, over the past couple of months I did a few live sessions, and one of the ones I did, I talked about 6 things I wish I knew as a tarot beginner, and this is actually one of the things I included specifically on that list, is the idea that tarot does not require you to have any particular belief system. As James phrases it, tarot is not a belief system, it is a tool. It is a tool that you can use and fit into whatever belief system resonates with you. So already I was super excited finding this because it resonates very strongly with my philosophy, the way that I approach the cards as well. For the next point, James writes, all tarot cards are neutral symbols. There are no quote-unquote good cards and there are no quote-unquote bad cards. The card symbols are enlivened by the questions, processes, templates, life experience, and understanding that we take to them. Of course, this resonates very strongly with me as well. This is another thing I've been talking a lot about recently. I mentioned this in several of the live sessions that I hosted on Instagram recently. The idea that I do really try to stay away from labeling cards as good or bad. I would add to the way that James phrased this, which I absolutely love, something that I think it was Kellyanne Maddox a lot of years ago, I heard her talk about this, that instead of thinking of things as good or bad or positive or negative, she thinks about what is the useful aspect of this thing. And that's really been a central tenet of my tarot practice for a long time, is every card has something useful in it. It's not about this card is good and this card is bad. Every card has something that can be of use to us. And then the second part James described about the cards being enlivened by the life experience, etc., that we bring to them. I almost feel like this could be a separate point, because this is another thing I talk about all the time when I'm mentoring with people who are just starting to learn tarot, is card meanings are fluid. There's sometimes people get really fixated on, oh, I have to learn the right meaning, or I have to learn like what this card actually means. And you cannot pin down any tarot card and say this is what this means. All of the meanings that we've come to ascribe to the cards are of course ascribed by human beings. So the life experience, the philosophies, all of those kinds of things that each of us bring to the table naturally infuses the way that we describe the cards. So yeah, I almost, as I'm sitting with these principles the way James has outlined them, and as I'm going to continue to think about how I would create my own or adopt some of his to make them my own, I like the idea of almost making that second sentence into its own principle, because I think there's a lot to that. Next up, James writes, neither the cards nor fate make things happen. People make things happen. I think this is a really good affirmation of something a lot of tarot readers talk about, myself included, which is even if you do sometimes dip into reading tarot predictively, which I don't do very often, but even when you do kind of dip into that, this principle to me is saying that no predictions are set in stone. Tarot is never there to take you away from your agency. It's not there to take you away from your sovereignty. In fact, I think tarot is really there to connect you in an even bigger way, an even more empowered way with your agency and with your sovereignty. So that's another point I love. I totally agree with that, 100%. Point number 4, James says, rather than considering a tarot card concept as a noun, it can be helpful to consider it as a verb or a process. For example, rather than saying, I'm a high priestess, one might say, I'm high priestessing. This I thought was really cool because it perfectly coordinates with something that I have learned from Stephen Forrest in the book I mentioned earlier, The Inner Sky, about astrology. That's exactly how Stephen Forrest approaches evolutionary astrology, and I really loved that concept when it comes to astrology. So, my sun sign is Cancer, so in this modality, instead of saying I am a Cancer, I would say I am cancering, and I love applying that to tarot as well. Just the same as it is with these astrological symbols, the tarot symbols are things that we are actively engaging with. They're not things that are passively happening to us, they're things that we are actively engaging with. Point 5, rather than considering a tarot card concept as a blanket statement, it can be helpful to consider it an open-ended question. For example, quote unquote, the Ace of Pentacles says that you're successful can become, the Ace of Pentacles asks, what personal definition of success have you cultivated in response to this endeavor? This ties into the empowerment aspect, making a tarot reading something that you can actively engage with, something that sparks self-discovery, something that asks you instead of just being a passive recipient, that you're really there, you're really present, you really have an agency in the process. Point number 6. The tarot practitioner is simply a guide. The person or group who is the subject of the tarot encounter is their own best expert on their life. The tarot encounter is a catalyst for them to tap into this personal expertise. This is actually really similar to the way I describe things on my website, on the page where you go to book a reading with me. I essentially talk about the fact that as a tarot reader, I'm sort of like a guide. I'm a facilitator, but my main aim is to connect someone with their own inner knowing, their own wisdom. I never believed that myself as I'm still okay using the word tarot reader, but James brings in this verbiage of tarot practitioner, which is something I've seen before. I first saw this from Annabelle Wen, and this is a bit of a side tangent, but I do like that idea of phrasing things in different ways, because I think the term tarot reader or the term tarot reading does maybe have some baggage. People associate that again with more of the passive modality, whereas this just brings in a fresh perspective on things. But yeah, anyways, what I was saying is that's really similar to how I phrase things on my website, that as a tarot practitioner or as a tarot reader, you are not there to be this high and mighty person like distilling this wisdom. You're there to support and guide and kind of be a beacon for the person you're working with, for them to connect to their own inner wisdom. Point 7. The fundamental questions that underlie the tarot encounter include: who am I? What questions do I carry in this lifetime? What is my full potential as a human being? What script can I write in order to become this? What are my unique qualities and gifts? How can I share these with my community and the world in a life-affirming manner? What do I most need to know or learn at this time? I love this so much because I've found this to be absolutely true. This is, in my practice, what tarot wants to do, is speak to these bigger, deeper questions. Often when I'm working with a client, and even if we go in thinking we're going to talk about something that seems very mundane, like something happening with their job or something like that, we often find that the cards start tapping into these deeper underlying themes that ripple through everything, right? So I love that so much. I love these big questions. Tarot to me is not that great for small talk. It is really great for getting into the heart and soul of the matter with these big, big questions outlined here. And last but not least, point number 8. The tarot encounter's primary aim is the intensification of a person's consciousness or self-awareness. It is an invitation to empowerment. One thought that I had reading these is, as I continue to sit with these and again think about adapting some of these, adding some of my own, This one I would probably put first. I don't think James was trying to order them in a specific way. It's just they're there. I don't think they're meant to be in a certain order, you know? But I like the idea of having this first because I think it really sets the tone for a lot of the ones that we already talked about, especially that theme of empowerment. That word has come up several times as we've been having this discussion. And again, we have the word encounter, which seems to be the preferred verbiage for James as opposed to a tarot reading. It's a tarot encounter. And again, I'm open to that. I like the idea of bringing in some new verbiage. I'm going to have to sit with it. I don't know if encounter is one that I'm going to really take on because for some reason to me that word encounter has this kind of like suspicious vibe. Like I guess I think of like alien encounters or something. I don't know. So those are the points that are outlined by James Wells on his blog. Again, I'll have a link to that below the video. And also that's it for my thoughts, expanding and adding what I think about the points that he initially shared. And again, I talked about this at the beginning, but these are, as James described them, living principles. They're not meant to box you in. They're meant to give you something to be fluid with, to sit with, to see how it resonates, to try it out if you vibe with this style of evolutionary tarot. And then I want to I'm just kind of brainstorming a little bit here because I've been thinking about this and I'm definitely going to be thinking about it more, but I already have a couple in mind that would be some principles that perhaps I would add as I create my own principles of reading tarot or approaching tarot, encountering tarot in this evolutionary style. So I want to mention a couple of those. One is tarot meets you where you are and guides you towards transformation. This has actually been the tagline on my website for a lot of years. So if you've been to my website, it might sound familiar to you, but I love that idea of tarot meeting you where you are in this present moment. When people come to me for a reading and they're feeling like a little nervous or whatnot, I always try to set them at ease because I don't feel like tarot ever wants to give you a message that you're not prepared for. When a reader or a practitioner is very skillful, they're always able to take the cards that come up and somehow let them meet you where you are. Not to freak you out, not to be scary or anything like that, but to really meet you where you are and give you something very, very useful. So that's something that I might add as one of my principles. Another thing I would think about adding, and this might fit in somewhere with the ones that were already outlined by James Wells, but I really like the idea of putting something in there specifically about a tarot reader being kind of like a translator. I know I'm not the first person who have said that. I've heard a few people describe reading tarot as being sort of similar to translating something because tarot is this symbolic language. And I like that on a lot of levels. One of the levels on which I enjoy that principle is translating things. Sometimes you don't get everything 100% right. So I think thinking of yourself as a translator also takes off some of the pressure to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to get everything 100% correct. And there's just this idea of some messages that come through in the cards are bigger than our human consciousness. So we're really just trying to translate them in the best way we can, that can make sense and that can meet us where we are, going back to what I just talked about a moment ago. Another thing I've been thinking about that I would maybe add as one of my principles is that evolutionary tarot is a holistic merging of the 4 styles of reading tarot. If you missed that, I've been talking about that constantly lately. I did a whole Instagram live and I posted it on YouTube going through the 4 styles of reading tarot. And Arthur Rosengarten, in his book Tarot and Psychology, I think is what it's called, he proposes a 5th modality. I think he calls it the global method, which is essentially like, just like I said, it's an integration of all of the methods, but I like the phrase evolutionary tarot better than that phrasing. But it's kind of a similar concept I think we were both getting at, that the evolutionary style of reading tarot kind of encompasses and again fluidly moves between these other various styles of approaching the cards. And the last principle I've been sitting with for now, this is something I talk about somewhere on my website, I think in my about section or something like that, but I say that essentially I believe tarot helps us connect with the deepest parts of who we are, and that when we connect and actualize and bring forward the deepest parts of who we are, we're able to be of service to the rest of the world. And it just, this is kind of my spiritual side coming out, but it just brings about this greater harmony, this greater beauty in the entire universe when we're able to do that. It's kind of like our personal healing, for lack of a better word, that happens through tarot is also a catalyst for that to happen on more of the cosmic scale. So that is my thoughts for now. I know it's a little bit all over the place. I hope it makes sense the way I'm phrasing things. As I've said a few times, this is something I am absolutely going to be sitting with more. I'll probably be writing more about it, maybe doing more videos about it, because I just think this is a really interesting thing to think about. And as I'm winding down, once again, I want to give gratitude to James Wells. I can't believe I didn't come across him sooner. Like I said, he hasn't blogged in a few years, but I'm looking forward to digging into the archives because I think I'm really going to resonate with his teachings and his approach. And last but not least, if you have not already done so, you can visit my website at carriemallon.com and sign up for my email address, and you will get access to a free 90-minute course that I created a couple of years ago called Foundational Tarot, which walks through some of the things that I think are foundational knowledge for beginning or expanding your tarot practice. So that is what I have for you guys today. If you have thoughts on any of this, I'd be so curious to hear. I'll look forward to that, so leave a comment if so. Otherwise, take care and I will talk to you later. Bye!